hydrated, playa? Ooh, my ear. Allergies. Whew. I just want to be able to hear out of my right ear. That's all. Hi, my name is Alana. Welcome to my YouTube channel. And on this channel, we review books. Before I jump into today's book review, you may notice my books have shifted a little bit. Actually, everything has moved up a row. These used to be down here. These used to be down here. Everything has shifted. That's because I've been purging. About a month ago, was it about a month ago? Yeah, about a month ago. I started just looking at my shelves and I was like, that gotta go. That's gotta go. Not interested anymore. Never gonna reread that. All of a sudden, like something in my brain switched and I was like, gotta go, gotta go, gotta go. I have a whole stack of books next to my door. And I now have two empty shelves down here with no intent of filling them anytime soon. Yeah, I haven't just been purging books. I've been purging clothes, and I don't own a lot of clothes. People think I own a lot of clothes. People who know me in real life, they think I own a lot of clothes. I don't. I just choose wisely. Things that, my hair is looking crazy, things that can be mix matched throughout multiple seasons. I don't own a lot of clothes. I don't want to own a lot of clothes. Actually, all of my clothes fit into one closet, minus the super out of season stuff that's really heavy that you only need for like 3 months out of the year where I live, and my outerwear. That's it. I mean, but sometimes you look at stuff and you're like, I've outgrown that and I've gotten rid of it with no intention of replacing it. Feels good. Feels good. I want to own less stuff. I'm not a minimalist, but I'm not a maximalist. I'm a what do I need? And every now and then it's nice to have things that bring you joy, but I've even purged my yarn. I have a lot of yarn. I had a lot of yarn. I don't have nearly as much as I used to, and I purged again. I have a rule now in my life. This has nothing to do with books. Actually, I will not buy a book until I'm about to read it anymore. I do not buy yarn anymore. If you don't know, I'm a knitter. I don't buy yarn anymore until I look in my stash and I realize I don't have the right yarn for this project. So then I purchase per project. Oh, my eye. Same with clothes and shoes. I look at stuff and I say, is there a gap in my wardrobe for this item? And if there is, can I wear it for at least 2 seasons out of the year? Can I wear it casually? And can I dress it up for work? If the answer is no to those things, I don't purchase it. And I will look and say, is there something in my closet that's similar? And if it's similar, I don't purchase it. Also, I have a rule, especially with clothing. Shoes, I can be kind of hard on shoes, but even with my clothing in particular, I look at that item and I think, can this be in my closet for the next 5 to 10 years? Meaning it's still going to fit. It's timeless and classic, and it's well made to the point where it's actually going to last. And that does not mean luxury. You can buy high quality items that have no logo on them. That's my philosophy on spending these days. And it has actually been my philosophy for a while when it comes to clothing, but in more areas of my life, I'm like really tightening stuff up. I look at stuff and I'm like, I don't even want it anymore. Anyway, this is what people come to for my videos in some cases. I ramble. Okay, Faces in the Water by Janet Frame. Look at this cover. Look at it. Man. Virago knocked it out the park. This is part of Virago's 40th anniversary. Faces in the Water is a book that is massively underread, I think. No, I know. I don't. I just wish more people read it. Janet Frame was a New Zealand author, and man, this is a reread for me. I first read this in 2020, and it had been on my mind recently, and so I read it late from last year into this year, and so I finally got around to drafting up a review. I do have an old review of this book, pre-YouTube days, again from 2020, but upon rereading this, I wanted to just completely redo the review because I didn't even revisit my old review. I wanted to just go for it, and this one's a lot more thorough. I will write about the season of peril. I was put in hospital because a great gap opened in the ice flow between myself and the other people whom I watched within their world. So, like I said, I first read Faces in the Water in 2020, and it's one of those books that continued to linger with me ever since I read it. But I had this strong urge to reread it again late last year into this year. It's an autobiographical novel in which the main character, Estina, is placed in an asylum, and she's placed in multiple asylums or mental institutions, in and out of them for 5 years is what this book chronicles. So Frame herself was misdiagnosed with schizophrenia and placed in hospitals for a period of her life, and she was even scheduled to have a lobotomy. So this is the time period where it's the mid 20th century, and lobotomies are common. Placing people in asylums for all types of stuff is common. You see a rise of these types of mental institutions during the Victorian era, and these state-run institutions. They're all over the world, and yeah. I'll get into some of that later. Fortunately, a doctor intervened, and Frame went on to have a stellar writing career. So during the time prior to her she was scheduled for a lobotomy, and she was already writing, and so she won an award, and somebody was like, "Don't do this to her. You're gonna kill a talent." Again, and she was misdiagnosed. Frame uses this narrative, this fictional narrative, but again, highly autobiographical, to highlight how poorly institutionalized individuals were treated, and how those who also just do not conform to societal norms and means of control are often the ones who are deemed dangerous. They're often the ones who are deemed crazy, and they must be rehabilitated in order to be introduced back into polite and proper society. So in Faces in the Water, Estina notes how those who are placed in these institutions were committed because they do not comply and they do not submit to society. Therefore, they must be retrained. They go against societal norms, and they're seen as a threat to its structure and order. The new fashionable means of quieting people and of making them realize that orders are to be obeyed, and floors are to be polished without anyone protesting, and faces are made to be fixed into smiles, and weeping is a crime. It's for your own good. Pull yourself together. You've been difficult long enough. The matron herself does not offer to undergo shock treatment in the way that suspected persons, to prove their innocence, are sometimes willing to take the first slice of cake that may contain arsenic. The act of settling in was surrounding with approval. The sooner you settle, the sooner you'll be allowed home, was the ruling logic. And if you can't adapt yourself to living in a mental hospital, how do you expect to be able to live out in the world? How indeed? But the ripple of humanity may take the forms of protest, depression, exhilaration, violence. It is easier to stun the beautiful fish with a dose of electricity than to handle it with care and transfer it to a pool where it will thrive. So Estina in this novel talks a lot about electric shock therapy. It permeates the whole novel. Like she has this fear of ETC, or electric shock therapy, ETC. I think so. What the acronym is, but she has this fear of electric shock, getting electric shock treatments, and so do many of these other characters, patients in this novel, because she goes into great detail about what it's like to actually get shock therapy. And she just said the fear just permeates. And so one major thing that Frame talks about and asks is, can you be made mad based on the environment that you're being forced into? What causes madness or madness? What causes craziness? So we have all these patients. What is it that got them committed? What has caused their madness, including our main character? It cannot be denied that Estina is suffering from something, but from my perspective, she's not There's nothing mentally, she's not crazy. She's lonely. She's misunderstood. And there are characters in this novel who are suffering with mental illnesses. But placing them in these institutions is only making their situations worse. They live in a constant state of fear because they're mistreated. They're undergoing treatments that are not humane. And this constant fear, the constant fear of being afraid, the constant fear of the unknown, the paranoia, it's all building up. And then eventually a person is going to break, only making them more insane, and only in a way with the nurses and the doctors saying, oh yeah, they were definitely crazy all along. Look at them. They can't get it together. We're offering all these treatments and they're only getting worse. They're insane. But really, it's fear. They're being misunderstood. They're lonely. And if there is something in which they are suffering with the mental illness, the treatments aren't helping them. The treatments are making them worse. And the fear leads in some patients to more madness, and they say it is a session to get you to talk, that your secrets are filed and kept in the treatment room. Have you ever seen a spinster living in a small house with your sister and her husband and their new first child, watching them rub noses and pinch and tickle, and in the night when you lie in the coffin narrow camp bed that would not hold two people anyway, listening to them because you cannot help it? I did not know my own identity. I was burgled of body and hung in the sky like a woman of straw. That last quote in particular, I pulled it because that is the root of what is bothering Estina, I think. She's very lonely. She has no family of her own. So she doesn't have a husband. She doesn't have a kid. And so so this particular portion was pulled out when she was discharged from hospital and her sister came, and so then she's staying with her sister. But her sister's life only re-emphasizes to Estina all that she doesn't have and all that she wants, and that loneliness. She wants a husband, she wants a kid, she wants that type of intimacy with another human being, and she doesn't have it. And she's sad. But then that loneliness starts to break her, and then she's readmitted into the hospital. That's just my take. She's very lonely. Frame makes sure to show how these patients are mistreated by the hospital staff. Let me back up one more time. Let me see. Yeah, before I get into other themes, let me back up into one other reason why Estina is admitted, I think. Yo, I just found a pair of socks I didn't even realize were missing. A folded pair of socks, clean socks that I clearly had rolled underneath. Hello. Estina questions things. When she's in hospital, she questions things. She does not take things at face value. She questions society. She questions those who are in authority, and that automatically makes you a threat. Don't you dare question anything. Do as you're told. These are not the drones you were looking for. And we all know that in society, even today, if you think outside the narrative, if you question the mainstream, you're a conspiracy theorist. Even if you're not. But nowadays, you can question any mainstream narrative and say, well, what's the other argument? I want to see other sides of this. What are other countries saying? What are other news outlets saying? Even if you don't always agree with what those other outlets are saying, you're trying to piece together the whole. And there are people who will say to you, oh no, you're going outside what the script is. How dare you, you conspiracy theorist, go somewhere. You're crazy. How dare you challenge what we're feeding down your throat? That is also Estina. She's misunderstood. She challenges things. My girl. I could go on and on about this book forever. Go read it. Let's talk about how these patients are handled or mistreated by the hospital staff. So Miss Frame, she highlights this throughout from beginning to end of this narrative. Also giving the reader a glimpse of what Frame herself endured while she was living in these institutions. Frame uses a lot of farm animal and herding imagery, indicating that these patients are treated less than human and more like livestock. Again, it also goes back to this theme of Do what you're told. Follow society. The hospital staff are attempting to herd these patients into what's deemed appropriate behavior according to society. But they're also seen as below that of the sane hospital staff. Dr. Howell drank from the special cup that was tied around the handle with red cotton to distinguish the staff cups from those of the patients and thus prevent the interchange of diseases like boredom, loneliness, authoritarianism. I was more horrified to see that, at times, nurses tried to provoke the patients into displays of violence. Her love changed to that then she would attack, and the nurse would blow her whistle, bringing other nurses to her aid, and Helen, who is one of the patients, would be put in a straitjacket, and for the rest of the day would rage about the room using her feet, her shoes having been removed, to convey her anger and frustration. So Helen in particular is a character where one of the nurses would goad her and show affection to her, but then brutally take that affection away on purpose, playing a game with this patient just to watch Helen go into a fit, because Helen was craving this attention, this affection, but one nurse in particular was playing around with her like a toy in a sense. And so then when Helen would act out, then they would put her in a straitjacket and say, look how crazy she is. It's so sick. No matter how long I called for help, no one would hear me. To remove part of my brain and turn me into a strange animal who had to be led about with a leather collar and chain and wearing a striped dress. So she's specifically talking about lobotomies here. And so there are patients in this novel who were lobotomized and they turn into just they're turned into a vegetable state. And Estina is so worried and anxious and fearful about this happening to her. And again, what do lobotomies do? They put the patient into a vegetable state so that you don't have to deal with the patient anymore. You don't have to deal with fits and rages. They just sit there. What stood out to me the most on my second read of Faces in the Water was how Frame focuses on the sense of smell. Estina's memories are often centered around the smells of the hospitals, because she has multiple visits to, I think, 2 or 3 different institutions, and it's eerie and sad, but it portrays this image that is just so well written and so well done. So the sense of smell in these scents really indicate to the reader just how desolate these places are for the patients. And out of all of our senses, it's our sense of smell that recalls memory the most effectively. I tried to fathom the smell of helplessness that seeped through, tainting our furniture and carpets and cushions, and the smell I brought back with me from 451, which is one of the wards that she stayed in, as if I had been visiting a temple where a mixture of loneliness and despair was burned in place of incense. My appetite had decayed at the mercy of the powerful ward smell, like fresh meat exposed to the sun and the flies. For it was true, the smell had been like the sun, in that the world of 541 revolved around it and drew from it a desolate kind of life, and the smell was like flies, the way it sucked at the air and at our breaths, in our clothes, and the invisible apparel of our minds. I smelled the room. I went shopping among the smells, old urine mixed with misery, for it was not the honest stench of babies not yet trained, but a preserved and outcast adult smell for those who have known and been deprived of their knowing. The smell of stale polished straw and straw dust, sunlessness, the smell of corners, of the wooden door that had been kicked and hammered upon for 70 years. First of all, her writing. She's a stellar writer. The quotes themselves and the way that she strings things together in her imagery and her symbolism, I think is enough to convince anybody to pick up this book. It's a very haunting novel, Faces in the Water. I can see why New Zealand reveres her as one of their greats. She has written other novels. She has written an autobiography as well. This is the only book of her that I've read. I will definitely be reading more of her novels because there are others that, again, talk about her experience as a mental patient. I am convinced that Frame was a genius. because of the way that she strings words together is like nothing I've ever read. Her writing is so nuanced. Some of her writing, let me put it this way. Her writing can be described as lucid. It's very dreamlike. It's very poetic. And however, I'm hesitant to call it dense. I think it's easy to understand once you get into the flow of it, but it is very nuanced, and the symbolism, there's no way you can catch it on the first read, all of it. It's very intricate, but still not to the point where you feel like you're missing something, if that makes sense. If you read this novel, you will never forget it. It just sticks with you because of the rawness that Frame is portraying during a time where these types of state-run mental institutions were the norm. Many of these people were placed in these institutions because no one wanted to deal with them. Their families didn't want to deal with them. They were quote unquote difficult. And even if they were suffering from a mental illness, they were just horrible places to be in. It also was not uncommon during the height of these state-run institutions for people with autism and ADHD to be placed into these types of facilities. And when you think about how common ADHD and autism is, it can be misdiagnosed. People can be labeled as bipolar, depressive, anxious disorders because those are comorbid with something like ADHD or autism or both. And so can you imagine if you don't fit in, you're processing the world a different way, you're overstimulated, and you have tics and you stim and whatever, and they're like, this isn't normal. Yeah, I'm not going to deal with this. Something's wrong with you. You're having these outbursts. Lock them up, right? That's essentially what it is. It's prison. So anyway, let me get off my soapbox. So I will say this. Fans of books like The Bell Jar, Girl Interrupted, which I haven't read yet and would like to read, but fans of The Bell Jar, fans of Wolf in particular, I think will love this book. If you like books with those types of themes. I think in general, though, on a broader scale, if you are a person who likes to read books about the misunderstood and the nonconformists, you're going to be at home in these pages, and that's what's eerie about it. If you're a nonconformist, if you are not with the mainstream, if you're a person who challenges things, a person who's been called crazy, but you're not, you're not. You just don't go with the flow. You're willing to think outside the box and analyze the structure around you, to analyze the matrix around you. This is your book. You're going to feel at home in these pages, and it's going to make it feel eerie, but comforting at the same time. It's this Frame, man. It's the weirdest feeling. Yeah, Faces in the Water will always be a 5-star read for me. I will read this again and again for the rest of my life because, again, it is only 222 pages long, this edition, but it is packed. It is packed. It is a stellar novel. That's all I'm going to say. Go read it. And I hope to read her other novels eventually. So much to read in so little time, but I'm going to leave it there. Have you heard of Janet Frame? If you have heard of her and you've read works of hers, what are your favorites? And yeah, I already know what novel I'm going to read when I pick up another Frame novel. But again, I'm only buying a book as I'm about to read it. So, thoughts and comments down below. Feel free to like and subscribe. Also, feel free to follow me on Instagram where I get up to more book shenanigans. I post all of my book content there first, and I'm always typically posting something goofy in the Instagram stories that have nothing to do with books, just because I like funny things, goofy, corny things. So that's what I'm doing in the Instagram stories. With that, I'm going to sign out, and I'll see you in the next one.